Well, there are a lot of things happening at the state capitol.
And luckily, we have ABC 10 State Matters reporter Jenny Hudd to join us to break it all down. Good morning to you, Jenny.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. Let's start with the news we just got within the past couple of hours here, which is Governor Newsom announcing an increase to the minimum wage here in California.
Yes.
It's already among the highest in the country. We already knew this was happening yearly because of law, but now we know how much.
Right. It's going to be $17.40 an hour. That's the statewide minimum wage. We just got the news this morning, so a lot of kind of breakdown to happen here in terms of how the state funds this increase, who this exactly applies to. But Newsom said, again, this is one of the highest rates in the country, and that this is all in the name of affordability, right? That's the buzzword we've heard over and over again from both parties, quite frankly. But again, they say this increase is to help Californians with affordability. Of course, Newsom in the past too has touted minimum wage increases specifically for fast food workers as well, right? That went up to $20. That was recent news. So again, big news this morning that California's statewide minimum wage starting January 1st of next year will be $17.40 an hour statewide.
And just a frame of reference here, the federal minimum wage remains at $7.25.
Right.
It's been that way since 2009. Let's talk November. Voters are going to be heading to the polls with a big governor's race, and you have been following the campaign strategy of Republican candidate Steve Hilton.
There was an acknowledgement almost by Steve Hilton this week in a social media post that he, as a Republican, and honestly with President Trump's endorsement, cannot win the election against Democrat Javier Becerra. He posted to social media, and the post starts with the question, can you be anti-Trump but still vote for me? And I think in speaking to a lot of political strategists, that's Hilton, again, acknowledging that he can't win outright as a Republican, just given California's demographic makeup or voter registration makeup. And also that he's subtly trying to distance himself from President Trump. He has the president's endorsement in the primary and general. And yes, maybe it helped him kind of surpass Chad Bianco and establish himself as the Republican candidate in the primary. But again, in the general, against a Democrat with name ID like Javier Becerra, it's a rather uphill battle for Republicans and Steve Hilton. So you see him distance himself from President Trump and trying to appeal to those beyond the Republican base.
Yeah, and we also have a lot of ballot measures that are going to be on the November ballot. One of the most talked about ones is the Billionaires tax, and you've been following this very closely. What has been the latest update to this?
It's going to be a packed ballot for voters, so look forward to that. But really the update is the Billionaires tax qualified for the ballot, right? It's going to appear in front of voters as Proposition 40. Opposition is ramping up. We've known from the get-go Governor Newsom has been opposed against the wealth tax. There are at least 4 opposition campaigns that are actively fundraising to, again, persuade voters to vote no on Prop 40. Newsom is spearheading one called Stop the Squeeze. So, again, they're ramping up efforts. They're ramping up fundraising efforts as well. But recently, as this opposition has increased, really the main reason is they say this one-time 5% emergency tax on California's 200 or so billionaires, that won't necessarily fill the healthcare gap long term.
And I guess the concern here from Governor Newsom is that you pass this tax and you might have some people fleeing the state.
Right, and billionaires account for a significant portion of California's general budget, which is largely funded by the income tax of Californians. So sure, there are maybe 200 or so billionaires, but again, they contribute significantly to our general budget, and our general budget funds healthcare, public safety, school funding, et cetera. So again, opponents say long term, the concern is that we're not going to have enough money for those day-to-day costs.
And now let's talk about Prop 39, which is the voter ID initiative.
This one's a little complicated. Opposition also ramping up to it, but there are 2 lawsuits surrounding Proposition 39, which is what this voter ID initiative will appear in front of voters as. It's called the Prohibits Citizens from Voting Unless They Present Government-Issued Identification Initiative. That's a very long name.
Yes, it is. It's a mouthful.
Exactly. And it basically, very simply put, it seeks to require additional identification from voters each time they vote. That mouthful of a name is what one of the lawsuits is over. Ballot proponents are suing the Attorney General for basically renaming the ballot initiative to that. The state is countering. All 9 voter proposed initiatives have been renamed. They say that's kind of standard practice from when it's first introduced to when it becomes an actual proposition that voters get to vote on. The name gets changed. So that's the counter argument by the state. But ballot proponents are saying that mouthful of a title that I just read, they're saying that's partisan and misleading and that they want that name to be more accurately reflected. So that's one of the lawsuits. The second lawsuit is actually filed by opponents against the proponents. They argue that the ballot argument, right, which the supporters and opponents of a ballot measure draft up, not the AG, they say that there are misleading and false claims in the ballot argument. So they're basically saying ballot proponents are inaccurately describing this voter ID initiative. And so, for example, they say, oh, this is supposed to make voting more accessible. Opponents, including Speaker Rivas, Pro Tem Limon, and Democratic candidate for Governor Javier Becerra are saying, no, that is untrue. This is going to disenfranchise voters. And so they're filing a lawsuit to basically ask proponents to more accurately reflect what exactly this initiative would do.
You're getting a little bit into the weeds here, but the wording is important when it comes to a ballot in November, and maybe someone at home who isn't following the case very closely. The wording that they see on their ballot could influence their vote.
And to summarize, again, the Attorney General is responsible for writing the ballot title and summary, which voters also will see. But again, the proponents and opponents of the measure are able to draft the argument, which is also what voters will see. So like you said, it's information and details voters see.
So you have to be very careful and read the fine line on your
and
ballot.
We have plenty of stories on all of these propositions on our website. So if you're confused at all, please tune into those.
All right, Jenny. Well, thank you for breaking all of that down for us. We're going to go to break and be right back.